Alright, so I'm just gonna run through my process and explain things along the way. So I've got some water heating up over here. Assuming that you are using some good quality coffee you're buying locally, on the lighter end of the spectrum, you're gonna want to follow something kind of like what I'm doing. If you're using a darker roast coffee, then you'll want to go with a little bit lower temperature and maybe grind a little bit coarser. But yeah, we'll go with how I work, and you can let me know if it works for you. So yeah, this is a Guatemala. It's nice and like nutty, a little sweet, really good single origin coffee. So I want to get my water up to boiling, get it as hot as possible. And while that's going, I'm going to weigh out some coffee and get that grinding. Alright, so got my scale here, zeroed out. I have this manual grinder. It's a 1Z Espresso J Max, I believe. It's a great hand grinder, grinds really well, pretty quick, works well for espresso. I wouldn't really want to use it if I was doing drip coffee, because it does take quite a while if you're grinding that volume of coffee. But for espresso, it's plenty quick enough, probably about 20-30 seconds worth of grinding. Which, for the cost and quality that you get out of it, totally worth it. Alright, so I'm going to grind 18 grams, I went a little over there. This is just a nice little coffee storage container. It's called an airscape. It just presses out all the extra air so your coffee stays fresh a little longer. If you use your coffee within a month, you don't really have to worry about doing anything special to take care of it. But if you know you're going to not be using coffee for a while, the best thing to do is actually put it in a very airtight container and freeze it. Just make sure it's totally dry, get as much air out as possible, and freeze it. And when you decide you're ready to use it, just thaw it out completely, and you can use it as if it was fresh. But always whole bean coffee. Never grind your coffee ahead of time. That's going to be the biggest difference, which I think you already know. So yeah, I've got 18 grams here. Gonna pop the lid off of here. Give this a grind. I'm gonna pause this for a second while I grind. Alright, so I ground my coffee. I like to give it a little tap, a couple extra swirls just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Like I said, this is a 1Z Espresso J Max, I believe. And I have it set at 24.3. And every grinder is going to be different. You just got to figure out what grind size works. But you're looking for something fine, but not so fine that it takes like an excessive amount of force or time to be able to pull your shot. So yeah, not hearing anything anymore. That means all the beans have been ground, and they go down into this little magnetic chamber, which is really nice. You just twist it and it pops off. So I got my coffee ground there. Oh, one thing I forgot to do that you can do to help make sure you don't have a ton of grounds left in your grinder is get just like the tip of your finger wet and stir it around your grounds or your beans before you grind them, and somehow that helps reduce the static electricity, and you end up with your grinds not clumping as much and not sticking to the grinder burrs, which is really nice. I just totally forgot to do that. So I've got my brew chamber over here. I'm gonna flip this over, and I like to heat up the whole thing, so I'm just gonna put it together here, set it on this little rubber mat, and fill it up with hot water so I can preheat. And again, we want to use boiling water. Get it as hot as possible, because it's going to start losing temperature as soon as you dry it out. So that's just holding temperature. My grinds are ready to use. Set this out of the way. One note about the, I think this is called a dispersion screen. Totally forgot. But yeah, it's got two sides. One side you can tell is like where they've pressed through, and there's all the little divots, and the other side's smooth, where it's just like little pinholes. I think according to Flair, you can do it either way, so it's up to you what you want to do. My recommendation is whatever you do, always do it that way, because I did try flipping back and forth and noticed that I was running into totally different scenarios each way. So either way will work, just like whatever way you find works for you, and you do that, keep it that way, because it's not worth experimenting both ways. And then having to throw off your recipe, because it will drastically change your recipe. Go ahead and dump this water. Alright, got a towel over here. So this guy, I'm gonna set back over here and fill it with some more water, just so it stays nice and hot while I prep my puck. Alright, it's gonna keep heating. Gonna dry this guy off on the inside. You really want this nice and dry because any water is gonna lead to clumping prematurely before you actually start to extract your shot. So I got my dosing funnel in here, grounds, those go in there. Just looking in there, I've got still like a little clump in there, so I'm gonna make sure I don't lose out on any. I want those full 18 grams. Cool, pretty clear. All right, let's see. I totally forgot to tear that out, but yeah, I know it's at least close to 18 grams, not too far off. Now this is a WDT tool. You can buy one of these off like Etsy if you want, or if you have a 3D printer, you can print one yourself. And then these are acupuncture needles or 3D printer clearing, like nozzle cleaning needles. Since I have a 3D printer and I had plenty of these needles, I just made it myself. Didn't cost me more than a few cents. And you can print this nice little base for it, and it's got some pennies embedded in it, so it's nice and heavy at the bottom, doesn't fall over. And I like set this on, take it off. But yeah, so this, in case you're not aware, is a tool to break up any little clumps in your espresso. What this does is it makes your coffee bed very finely distributed, very smooth and evenly packed once you tamp it, to prevent what's called channeling, which means water finding the path of least resistance. And say like over on this side it was all clumped up and ended up being packed way tighter, then the water's going to want to come out this side. So what happens is your coffee on this side gets way over extracted, comes into contact with way more water than it should, versus this side of the coffee not getting an even amount of extraction. And you end up with a really unbalanced cup, not sweet, plenty of bitter and sourness that just throws it off and makes it very unenjoyable. But yeah, WDT tools, especially for home espresso machines like this, make a huge difference. And they could really, really be a game changer. Which I did find to be the case with the Flair. I printed this after about a week of owning the Flair and noticed a huge improvement in quality. So yeah, I'm gonna give this a little tap. Then I will get this tamp lined up, take this dosing funnel off, and give this a good tamp. You don't really have to worry about tamping too hard. You kind of just press until you notice it doesn't really move anymore. You just kind of put your weight on it, but you can't technically over tamp. And I'm gonna grab a brush, which I keep like a little food basting barbecue brush, whatever, around, just to clean this guy up. My grinder came with one as well, but it's always packed away, so I never use it. This one's always on my countertop. Also useful to just, sweep these grounds off so I can sweep them later. Alright, so I've got my puck all prepared. I'm gonna throw my dispersion screen in there. Get it nice and clean. Don't want too many bits floating around. Go back up here. Dump that water. Alright, and we are ready to pull a shot in just a second. So this is nice and hot. I use this nice little graduated cylinder glass, and milliliters are going to line up roughly with grams. And since I did 18 grams in, I'm going to pull about 45-50 grams out. So I'm going to watch this, and when it takes some practice to tell, but you have the crema on top of your espresso and like the dark part of the espresso underneath. And as you pull the espresso, the crema builds up, but it's actually a lot more crema than there actually is liquid. So you have to like find where that lower line is, and it's kind of like in between the dark part and the crema part of the espresso, and you want to measure at that because the crema is just all going to deflate. So I will do that, but I do tear this out so I can see and get a more accurate reading of how close I actually am to that number I'm trying to hit. Fill this up with hot water. I fill it up to just below the little ring where the pressure gauge goes. If you overfill it, it leaks and you don't get a good seal and you won't pull a nice shot. Sometimes I overfill it a little bit and I'll just like tip the corner of the towel in there to clean it up. Soak out a little bit of water. Alright, so I got my pressure gauge. Let me see if I can get this to where you can see. Just turn it up a little higher. So yeah, at my coffee shop, I used to always pull shots at like 6 or 7 bars. So that's what I usually do here. So I'm gonna start my timer, ramp up pressure. Oh, this shot is not pulling well at all. Oh well. So yeah, you can see it's channeling, going everywhere. It's probably because I just let it sit for too long. But yeah, so this is gonna be a bad shot. But if you do it all faster and don't take as long as I did, then it'll be better. But yeah, you can see it was a reasonable amount of force, nothing crazy. But yeah, you do need to like apply constant pressure. This is gonna be an awful shot, but I'm gonna drink it anyways. But yeah, I hope that helps, and know that normally my shots are a lot better than that. That was a fluke. Enjoy. Quick update. That shot was hideous, but it's actually really good. It just goes to show that sometimes, even when everything works out the way you think it should, and you think you do everything right, your results might look bad. Ultimately, just taste it. If it tastes good, then it tastes good and it works, you know. Some people get really caught up on the numbers of it needs to be this much coffee in, this much water out, be during this much amount of time, and they get so obsessed with all of that they focus on those numbers more so than they focus on the actual taste of what they're drinking. And they forget about the fact that like coffee's supposed to taste good and you're supposed to enjoy it. So yeah, if it tastes good and you like it and you break all the rules I showed you, then screw it, man. It's good, and enjoy it. Cheers.